Welcome to the Hardest Working Committee, the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Assemblyman Carter.
Present.
Assemblyman DeLong.
Present.
Assemblyman De Silva.
Here.
Assemblywoman Duran.
Here.
Assemblywoman Gonzalez. Assemblyman Gurr.
Here.
Assemblyman Hibbets.
Here.
Assemblyman Koenig.
Here.
Assemblyman MacArthur.
Here.
Assemblyman Wynn.
Here.
Assemblywoman Taylor. Assemblywoman Thomas.
Here.
Chair Torres.
Welcome to the audience here in Carson City, those joining us by video conference in Las Vegas, and those listening over the internet. Just a couple housekeeping items. Please remember to silence all electronic devices. If you wish to testify, please sign in at the table by the door and provide a business card to the committee secretary. If we could mark Assemblyman Gonzalez present. For those joining online, please be sure to mute your microphone when you are not speaking to minimize any background noise. When testifying, please turn on the microphone and clearly state your name and affiliation, if any, for the record. Then turn the microphone off each time you're done speaking. Handouts should have already been provided to our committee manager. We expect courtesy and respect in our interactions during the meeting, even if we may not agree with another person's position. Committee members will be using their laptops to view handouts and other documents. Please do not view this as a sign of disrespect or inattention. Public comment will be taken at the end of the meeting. Each person will be limited to 2 minutes. In addition, the public may submit written testimony to the committee up to 24 hours after the hearing. Just a couple notes for members of the public. We are going to go ahead and begin today with a bill hearing on AB 266, and then we will proceed with our work session. And for this hearing, we're going to have Vice Chair Duran take over, so 1 minute recess.
I like doing that. We will now resume with AB 266 presented by our own chair. This is a provision relating to governmental administration. You may proceed.
Thank you. Good morning, Vice Chair Duran and committee members to the hardest working committee in the Nevada State Legislature. I am Assemblywoman Selena Torres, and I proudly represent Assembly District 3 in Clark County. Thank you for the opportunity to present AB 266, which relates to language access plans for local governments. With today being Latino Lobby Day at the legislature, we are reminded that the fight for a more inclusive and representative government continues. The first step to ensuring all Nevadans, including those who are limited English proficient, are able to access services offered by local governments and participate more fully in our great community. Just a couple pieces of background information on AB 266 before we do the bill breakdown. AB 266 builds on Senate Bill 318 that was enacted in 2021. A 2021 legislation, in part, required each agency in the executive department of the state government to develop and biannually revise a language access plan that includes information related to existing services available to individuals with limited English proficiency and recommendations for meeting the need for such services among those served by that agency. AB 266 is now focusing on local governments. So those are our cities and our counties. 29.9% of Nevadans speak another language other than English at home. I could tell this committee story after story of constituents expressing frustration because they did not know that local governments would be making changes to their parks or having large projects in their neighborhood solely because they could not read the information that was sent out to them. Quite specifically, recently in Las Vegas, there has been a lot of construction on Charleston. And I know for those of you that live in Las Vegas, it's no stranger to you the amount of construction that's going on in downtown Las Vegas off of Charleston and Main Street area. Many of those businesses, many of those homeowners were notified and had the opportunity to participate in public meetings regarding those projects. unfortunately, because many of them lacked the ability to understand the information that was being sent to their homes, they weren't able to participate in those government meetings, and they had no idea that such a project was even being considered, and were frustrated that they weren't able to participate. In reality, this impacts local governments. This makes constituents frustrated. It means that city council members are getting call after call of frustration, not knowing why there's so much construction in front of their business, not knowing that they had the opportunity to participate, and frustration that they didn't have the opportunity to participate because they didn't understand the notice that was sent out to them. I will apologize to the committee because obviously the amendment came very late yesterday, but I am going to go ahead and walk through the bill using the amendment today, just to clarify too the organization of the document. So the amendment is on the left-hand side, and the explanation on the right-hand side will cover the entire explanation of that section, including the amendment. So that would cover the entire part of that. So for Section 1 of the bill, it has conforming changes for Chapter 244, which impacts counties. You'll notice that this bill is within two different sections. It's in Section 244 and then 268. 244 applies to counties, 268 for cities. It is the exact same thing for counties and cities, except for the counties. The counties is just in a different chapter of the NRS. Section 2 requires that counties with a population of 100,000 or more ensure public notices that are mailed out for planning commission meetings are available in every language in which voting materials are provided. So currently this would apply to Clark and Washoe. We are looking to really clarify that the public notice it informs them where they can go on the website. We don't want local governments to have to fit, 4 different languages on one public notice. So really it'll say to read this in Spanish, para leer en español, and then the link so that individuals can go and access those documents so that there isn't a million words on one single document. Additionally, it requires local governments to make good faith efforts to find translators, but recognizing that, there just isn't enough translators available as well. It outlines the requirements for Section 3 of this bill outlines the requirements for language access plans developed by local governments. Language access plans are currently required for state agencies. This expands that so that it would be now applicable to local governments so that they're planning for language. You'll note with the amendment that there has been clarification that the Board of the County Commissioners should submit the language access plan to the Office of New Americans annually by August 1st of each even-numbered year. I guess that would be biannually. I apologize, that's my error, but it would be every 2 years by August 1st of each even-numbered year. And then that plan would go to ONA, and ONA will be responsible for making legislative recommendations. Section 4 of the bill outlines the responsibilities of the Office of New Americans in developing language access plans. Additionally, it creates a language access coordinator position. This would add 1 full-time employee to serve as a language access coordinator within the Office of New Americans. They would provide oversight, central coordination, consultation, and technical assistance to state agencies, a board or county commissioners, and governing body of a city in their implementation of language access requirements under this chapter. They would provide all covered entities with a manual containing baseline policies and procedures for compliance. They would maintain a publicly available roster of language interpreters and translators in public contact positions and their language is spoken. They'd help with the training of state agencies, the boards of county commissioners, and governing bodies of a city to effectively recruit and retain language interpreters and translators and support the recruitment and retention thereof. They'll receive and investigate language access complaints against the agency. They will implement an annual budget and procurement strategy for expenses related to state language access, and they'll provide local governments with demographics of constituents with limited English proficiency. You'll note that the original bill as written required local governments to provide that data on their language access plan. In conversations with local governments, as well as with the Office of New Americans, it makes more sense that the Office of New Americans just disperses data to local governments that might be relevant. The local governments have expressed difficulty with accessing some of that data, and so any way that the two agencies, being Office of New Americans and local governments, can work together to find that will be helpful. Section 5 is conforming changes for Chapter 268. Section 6, quite honestly, does this exact same thing as Section 3, but it applies to cities. And then Section 7 does the exact same thing as Section 2, but it applies for cities. Section 8 and Section 9 are just conforming changes for Chapter 244. And then I'll go ahead and introduce Leo Benavides from the city of North Las Vegas.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Torres. For the record, my name is Leonardo Benavides, Government Affairs Manager for the City of North Las Vegas. Thank you to Assemblywoman Torres for working with us on some of our concerns in regards to the timeline, making sure that we're able to appropriately have everything translated in time as needed. And then most importantly, try to have this as sort of more of a forward-thinking approach, right? Working with the state, there's certain data and demographics in the version that it's not just easily accessible for us, but it makes sense if we're collaborating with the state to have that information, have an understanding of who we have in these communities that need the services. What does that look like, and who is it that we need to target, especially for our internal city services? And so what I've been working with her on this language has been specifically clarifying that end in regards to working with the local governments and the Office of New Americans. And then secondly, as well, working on the notice requirements. And so what we're focusing on is sort of what the Assemblywoman has noticed, focusing more at the granular level, as certain projects within city, right, a neighborhood, where people will get a notice and not fully understand what's happening there and may not come to a meeting because they don't understand what's happening a street over. And so that's the idea here, to be able to make sure that for planning commission meetings, people are getting these notices, they have the ability to look up on the website and see in their preferred language what is coming, so that then when they come to the meeting, they'll be able to participate and have access to the agenda, which will also be translated as well. The city of North Las Vegas has committed to ensuring that our multilingual communities have a say in the process. We've already taken steps to ensure that we have more access as we look for ways to support languages such as English and Tagalog at our planning commission meetings, as well as continue our outreach efforts in Spanish, and we'll soon look to open the Dolores Huerta Center, which will offer community services and information in both English and Spanish as well. So for us, AB 226 is a natural progression as we look to make sure that more of the community has access and is included in this planning process. Thank you very much.
So, Torres, for the record, at this time, we are open for questions.
And thank you. We will now go to Assemblywoman Thomas and then Taylor. Anybody else for questions?
Good morning, and thank you, Vice Chair Duran. And thank you for this presentation. I received a lot of information that I had questions about prior to your presentation, and I appreciate it. One question that I do have, Section 6 of your amendment, you show it in red. And when I'm reading, the Office of New Americans shall collect and maintain demographic data on the residents of the state and provide such information to the cities of the state so that cities may tailor their services to meet the needs of the city's residents. It's kind of confusing that statement there for me, because the state has to collect the information and then give it to the cities, and the city, I'm wondering if the constituents that you're really concerned about, whether or not they will provide this information to you, because, we're looking at a lot of the citizens are undocumented, and a lot of them would probably prefer to stay in the shadows, which we don't want them to, but we know that they do. And those citizens that this is directed to, how do they really know that this is for their benefit?
Assemblywoman Selena Torres, for the record, and thank you for that question, Assemblywoman Thomas. So there are a couple different things here. So a lot of this demographic data is actually collected by the U.S. Census. So there is, I forget the formal name of it, but there is a census that's done like every 5 years that tracks very specific demographic data. And so some of that, a lot of it that has to do with language is going to be tracked by that every 5 years. Additionally, the Office of New Americans already has access to certain data that would be relevant to this. Additionally, school boards and school districts have data because they know the amount of students in the area that are coming as English language learners, identifying like where we have those needs. So I think that there's different areas where they have that data. This is not adding or requiring the state to collect any more data than what we already have. It's really requesting that the Office of New Americans help synthesize that data that is specific to language access and provide that data to the community.
Okay. Assemblywoman Taylor?
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, and thank you, Madam Chair, for the presentation. A couple of things. First of all, thank you for the grid, because when there are a lot of changes that come forth, which sometimes happens because you're, hearing partners out there saying, hey, how about this and how about that? But thank you for the grid because it was so easy to follow. I'll be using this. Just wanted to say that. Secondly, I know that, and I may have missed this in here, know that the intention is to get the data from the office, right, Office of New Americans, which will help each community know, each city and county know what their prevailing second languages are, or maybe primary languages, outside of English, so that they can target that. Is there a percentage, how far down, for lack of a better light, do they go? Are you requesting that they go so they can tend to the needs of this citizenry?
Assemblyman Slanatoris, for the record, that's a great question, and I do want to know, I'm definitely a teacher at heart, so anyway, I can create an easy to look at document. It's definitely
send me the
something I
template, but anyway,
appreciate.
go ahead.
I will,
Yes.
I will. But additionally, looking at like what languages would be required, it would be languages required by the ballot. So those are already standards that we have in the NRS. And so right now in Clark County, that's going to require English, Spanish, Tagalog, and eventually Chinese. And then in Washoe County, that's going to be English and Spanish.
Okay, so really, if I may follow up, Madam Vice Chair? Thank you. So really, it's looking at those in, so for the ballots, based on, because we already have to do that, we already should do that, it's just going to be following that pattern, whatever those numbers are.
Assemblyman Slanatoris, for the record, yes. Yeah, so as our community changes, as the state changes, then the languages that local governments would be required to provide would change. Obviously, I expect that those changes would be, over time, right? I don't think we're gonna see a substantial change, or 25 languages by next week, and if that is the case, we can have a conversation with this body, and that might be a recommendation that would come out of the Office of New Americans, right? But it would require a substantial amount of folks to be speaking that language as their language, native language.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. And don't forget the template.
Assemblyman DeLong?
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Some of this language is very similar to a hearing we had yesterday in Ledge Ops about the VOA and the 5-year census data, and the fact that the counties are tracking those data to determine compliance with the VOA and what language the ballots need to be in. And so that's got me thinking, so the counties are already managing that to make sure that their ballots are in compliance with the Voting Rights Act. So why are we, in this bill, why do we need to use the Office of New Americans to do this data work if the counties are already tracking those data to determine which languages? Thank you.
Assemblyman Slanatoris, for the record. So there's additional data that the Office of New Americans might have access to that it can just share out. And so it'd just be very specific. So yes, I agree the counties have access to that data. But, recognizing that the Office of New Americans specifically is working with we'll have a coordinator that's responsible for language access. I think that this is really just requiring that any other information, any other things that data points that has to do with language access. You'll notice that in the original bill, looking right now at page 3, but I know that it would also apply to section 6 of the bill. But in section 3 of the bill, you'll notice that we originally required like relevant demographics of persons residing, their preferred language and literacy level of residents, the ability of residents to access services in the county, the number and percent of residents in the county who are indigenous, the number and percent of residents in the county who are refugees. And we just recognize that, those data points might not be data points that local governments have. Also recognizing that the Office of New Americans is in a unique position and, with the funding of a language access coordinator might have access to data that local governments might not have, and just requiring that data to be shared. So obviously it's very broad in the amendments to just any demographics or data that apply, and that's intentional, so that if there is information that the Office of New Americans might have that local governments might not have or might not be looking at, they would provide that information.
And then Leonardo Benavides for the record, right? I think, and that's what we're looking here at the attention of the bill, right? For the services that we as local governments are providing, aside from electoral services and for the voting purposes, working with the Office of New Americans, getting that constant data, having an understanding of what our communities looking like and what are these languages that are needed for not just our planning commission, but for community outreach, for other events.
Any more questions from the committee? Okay, we got Hibbets, and then, oh, you have two? Okay, one for each? Oh, okay. One for each. You get a twofer, right? Okay, then I will go back to Assemblywoman Thomas after that.
Thank you, Chair. Assemblywoman Torres, using your example of construction along Charleston, depending on where you're at on Charleston, specifically east of the US 95, that is the border between the county and the city of Las Vegas. Being that construction, and I know there's a lot of construction there, I've seen the backups. Being that there's construction on that border, who would be responsible in this case for sending out those notices, the city or the county?
Assemblywoman Slanatoris for the record. I don't know that I necessarily have that information, but I will say that whoever is currently having the planning commission meetings, right? So anytime we getting, for example, we get notices all the time to our mailboxes at home, our residents. If you own a business, you would get them to your business address as well, that are notifying you of planning commission meetings, any type of changes that they're going to be doing in your community. This would require that those notices are available in whatever languages. So whatever is currently statutorily required, this has no impact on who is required to submit those notices. The only thing it's saying is that in those notices, they would be required to have them in other languages.
Thank you. And Mr. Benavides, is there anything currently in statute preventing North Las Vegas from doing this?
Leonardo Benavides for the record. No, there's nothing in statute, but I think this is something that we are already working on, striving towards, and having more access in, say, our planning commission meetings and our city council meetings. I think something like this is a step in the right direction, right? This is an aspirational goal, as the Assemblywoman mentioned earlier, right? There's not that quite enough staff or certified translators going around yet. And I think as we start to identify what that looks like in each of our separate jurisdictions down south and up in northern Nevada, I think it's important to be able to further tailor those services, right? And I think what's helpful here, right, instead of just filing a report every year, is working with the state and the Office of New Americans to make sure we have a good understanding of what that service is. So I think this is a good first step in providing that, but the city of North Las Vegas has definitely been working towards some of that already.
And Assemblywoman Torres for the record. And the other thing that I think is important to notice is that there is nothing in statute right now that requires the Office of New Americans to collaborate with local governments to create language access plans. So if a city were to, take it upon themselves to create a language access plan, they would not have the guidance of the Office of New Americans, and it's really beyond the resources of what the Office of New Americans would be able to do right now. So this consolidates this. It also makes sure that it's consistent between municipalities and local governments to ensure that we're looking at the same types of plan. And I think even more than that, it's requiring the Office of New Americans to synthesize the information provided of these plans, present them to the legislature, specifically to the Interim Committee on Government Affairs, and make legislative recommendations. So, session after session, community members have expressed frustration with the lack of services available in their native languages, and frustration and lack of ability to participate in government work. Nonetheless, we're not having a policy conversation about language access as a community. We have individual legislators that are carrying language access bills, but we do not have conversations about language access as a legislative body, and I think that this will help motivate and ensure that we are having conversations about what that looks like, because regardless of an individual's native language at home, they're Nevadans, and we have a responsibility to represent them and to create policy that is going to positively impact them.
Just a comment, is it kind of more or less like streamlining so everybody's like on the same page to where everybody's having the same type of language access throughout the cities, municipalities, and so on?
Assemblyman Torres, for the record, I think it's definitely opening up that dialogue so that we can do that. You know, in some of the presentations that we heard in this committee earlier this session, you know, we heard, you know, some of the great work that the city of Henderson is doing to make sure individuals have support or access to information in different languages. I've heard some of the great work that the city of North Las Vegas is doing. I've heard some of the great work that the city of Reno is doing to ensure that their communities have access to information in their native language. Nonetheless, you know, I think that we need to be having that one conversation and synthesizing that and saying, like, this is some of the stuff, and like this should be the minimum, this should be the bar. So this allows for us to have that like one conversation, and really like figure out, you know, how can, you know, what are different governments, what are different municipalities doing well.
And this is Leonardo Benavides for the record, right? I think, and that's why the data part here is so important, right? We don't know what we don't know, right? Maybe many in these community, they maybe get these notices, or maybe they see them posted, and maybe they don't fully understand what's going on or how it impacts them, right? Or maybe they show up to a council meeting and they're not able to follow clearly what's going on, right? And I think setting this baseline to begin with helps with that process, helps us understand who's out there, who needs these services, right? Making sure that not only are they getting the notice, but are able to come to the council meeting and be able to understand what is happening and how they can participate. So as the Assemblywoman says, accessibility is important here, and setting this guideline across the state and understanding what the different needs are, I think, are what this bill brings forward. That is very important.
Thank you for that. Assemblywoman Thomas?
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Question. In Section 4, when you say that you are creating a language access coordinator position, I just want to know if a requirement will be for that coordinator to be versed in multi-languages.
Assemblyman Torres, for the record, you know, I think I have faith that the Office of New Americans will find somebody suitable to do that, and so I don't want to put anything into statute that requires any specific language to be spoken. But I have faith that the Office of New Americans will appropriately ensure that we have somebody that understands the needs of the needs of the communities that they're serving, and that could be somebody too that has maybe more of like an education background or academic background, or has worked in services providing information in other languages. But I don't know that it's appropriate in statute to put that requirement.
I think the reason why I'm asking this is because you can have, you know, a person that's English, you know, and primary, and don't understand the different nuances as far as different languages. So I was just concerned that, you know, if we are creating a position like that, that maybe that should be one of those requirements, that they at least be multilingual.
Thank you. I appreciate that feedback. I'm happy to continue to take this conversation offline. I just want to make sure that it's consistent with what we have statutorily done in the past as well. And I do have faith, you know, that the Office of New Americans recognizes, you know, the need for language access, that they probably most appropriately they would find someone bilingual. But, you know, that being said, there might be somebody who's a phenomenal candidate that isn't. You know, I recognize, you know, my mom taught ESL for many years, what was then ESL, it's now English Language Learners, at the community college. And my mom does not speak another language, but was able to do the job well. And so I think it's important to note that, you know, somebody who might be very suitable for that position might have some background in DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, might have a different type of background that makes them valuable to that position, or working with local governments, or they might speak a language that maybe isn't one of the required languages too. So I would be cautious to put something into statute that requires that of them, but I have faith that the Office of New Americans would execute this, especially considering the requirements put into place with the amendment.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, I just have one question. So I noticed that you had them like that. Are they going to be certified translators or interpreters?
Assemblyman Selena Torres, for the record. So that's a really good question. So, and I think that's actually a conversation that the language access coordinator could have with an interim committee on government affairs. And here's why. Local governments are like, we provide certified translators, and there is a translation certificate that you can receive for medical. You can also receive a certified translator license for the courts. That all being said, you cannot be a certified translator in local governments. And those are very different things. So, recognizing the barriers to that, and I think that's something, we might consider in the future as well, is like where you can be a certified translator for local governments. And local government information is a lot more accessible. It's usually more conversational than something that might be translated for the courts. As you all would know, reading a bill is very different than something like a conversation or a hearing that you might have. And so the information that would be translated within local governments is likely not going to be as high, elevated in language. And so I think that it's important for us to eventually have a conversation of what that translation process looks like.
Thank you for that. Now, next, we will hear testimony in support of Bill AB 266. And any of those wishing to support the bill, please step forward. I'm sorry, and if you can please state and spell your name for the record. Thank you.
Good morning, committee members. For the record, my name is Paula Luna, Paula-Luna, Operations Manager for Battleborn Progress, and we're testifying in support of AB 266. The 2020 census showed that nationally, Nevada is the third most diverse in the state, fourth with the most Asian American Pacific Islander residents, and fifth with the most Latino residents. Language access is an essential step for inclusivity in our community. We all know the incredible diversity of our state, especially in counties with larger populations. AB 266 ensures public notices are in languages our communities understand so that they are able to participate in meetings that severely impact their day-to-day lives. The Sunshine Law mandates that government agencies must maintain transparency and disclose their activities to their constituents. However, our constituents are not able to participate and become aware of what their elected officials are doing on their behalf. We need to meet them where they're at. And in this case, that means supporting AB 266. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anybody else here in Carson City? Anyone and we will go to Las Vegas. Anybody in Las Vegas for support of AB 266? Seeing none, broadcast, is there anybody on the line that wishes to support AB 266?
Callers, if you would like to testify in support of AB 266, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers on the line to testify at this time.
Thank you. We will now go into opposition of AB 266. Would anybody have testimony or support or in opposition of AB 266? Please step forward here in Carson City. Seeing none, we will move to Las Vegas. Anybody in opposition of AB 266? Seeing none, we will go to broadcast. Broadcast, is there anybody in opposition of AB 266?
Chair, the line is open and working, but there are no callers on the line to testify in opposition at this time.
Thank you. We will now go into the neutral. Is there anybody in neutral for AB 266? Please step forward and state and spell your name for the record. Thank you.
Good morning, Vice Chair Duran and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Jennifer Berthiaume. That's Berthiaume, Government Affairs Manager for the Nevada Association of Counties, or NACO. On behalf of our NACO members, we are testifying neutral on AB 266. We would like to thank Chair Torres for engaging with counties and including us on the amendment. Thank you.
Hello, committee. Madam Vice Chair, my name is Ashley Garza Kennedy, representing Clark County. We are also neutral on AB 266. We are thankful to the sponsor for working with us and other local governments. And with the amended language as presented, we are neutral. Earlier this year, Clark County, we launched our new social media pages entirely dedicated to providing information in Spanish to increase language access. Our Clark County Public Information Officer leading these efforts have met with the Office of New Americans, and we look forward to the partnership moving forward. Thank you.
Good morning, Vice Chair Duran, members of the committee. For the record, David Cherry, Government Affairs Manager with the City of Henderson, here proudly in my Rebel Red. We are here today in neutral on the amendment to AB 266 as presented. The City of Henderson honors the growing diversity of the residents who call our community home, and we recognize the need to provide information in languages other than English. We've already have in place programs that provide translation services for those accessing city services and have undertaken efforts in our multiple departments to develop materials in several languages, including meeting all requirements related to voting materials. We thank Chair Torres for working with local governments to refine her proposal and take into consideration our suggestions on how to make language access requirements workable and effective for everyone. Thank you.
Anyone else for opposition of AB 266 in Carson? Seeing none? Oh, neutral, I'm sorry, neutral. Okay, I forgot where I was at. How about Las Vegas? Is there any, I see one person. If you can state and please spell your name for the record.
Thank you. Good morning, Vice Chair and members of the committee. I'm Sharina Diasis, CHARINA-DEASIS, Executive Director for the Governor's Office for New Americans, testifying neutral on AB 266. Our immigrant and refugee population are approximately 20% of our population, and according to the latest census, almost half, about 46.3, speak English less than very well, or as we call them, limited English proficient. From 2000 to 2021, there was a 59.1 increase of those who are limited English proficient in our state. Language access is critical to the population that ONA serves. It enables connection and communication with our LEP Nevadans, whether it's to apply or receive services, or relaying critical information during emergencies, or avoid undesirable impacts on public safety. A robust language access plan by government agencies with efforts to implement it will reduce costs, and staff won't be spending time correcting miscommunication errors, increase agency efficiency, and improve responses during emergency and disaster preparedness, and help limited English proficient Nevadans access government services. Additionally, a report by Migration Policy Institute, or MPI, outlined that successful language access programs across the U.S. had a few things in common. One is agency oversight, or advisory councils, or technical assistance, or all three, accountability mechanisms, data systems and population tracking, community involvement, of course, and financial resources. According to the report, language access programs should have all of these to be successful. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you. We will now go to broadcasting. Broadcasting, is there anyone on the line for neutral of AB 266?
Chair, the line is open and working, but there are no callers choosing to provide neutral testimony at this time.
Thank you. We will invite the Chair Torres back up for any closing comments.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Selena Torres, for the record. Thank you so much for hearing AB 266. I would like to just remind the committee, I took a lot of time to meet with stakeholders to hear their concerns and to make sure we were able to get them in a place where they felt that the bill allowed for them to start with this process of improving that language access, but that also just made sense for local governments and how local governments work. And so I really appreciate stakeholders for coming to the table and presenting amendments and making recommendations. I look forward to continuing this work. I've had conversations up until 2 minutes before the hearing about this bill and how we can strengthen it and make it most effective for the state of Nevada. Ultimately, what I think is most important is to recognize, here in the Nevada State Legislature, we're not representatives just for the people that vote for us. We represent every single person that lives in this state. And every Nevadan deserves access to participate in government. Every Nevadan is welcome to come to this table to testify in support of legislation, to voice their concerns. Every Nevadan should be able to speak to their local government about a change that's in their backyard because of the property that they own. Because you're not required to be a citizen to own a property in the state. You're not required to speak English in order to own property in the state. And I think it's really critical that we're having a conversation about how we make government accessible and how we ensure that every voice, every constituent is able to participate in the democratic process. Thank you for hearing AB 266, and I urge your support.
Thank you. 1 minute recess.
At this time, we'll go ahead and close the hearing on AB 266. The next on the agenda is the work session. So we do have 2 bills under consideration for work session today. It is not customary for the committee to take testimony or otherwise rehear the bills during a work session. However, we may invite a witness to come forward for clarification or questions during a consideration of a measure or for an amendment. We are going to go ahead and start today with AB 143.
Thank you, Chair Torres. This is Jennifer Rudy, Committee Policy Analyst for the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs. As such, as a LCB staff, I'm nonpartisan and can't advocate for or against any measures. I'm just going to walk you through the work session. Assembly Bill 143 authorizes a Board of County Commissioners to convey without consideration and without complying with certain requirements in existing law real property that the county acquired directly from the federal government for the purpose of clearing title to the property. The real property must be conveyed as prescribed to the person or persons as applicable who have an interest in the property. The measure exempts such a conveyance from the provisions that generally apply to the sale or lease of property by a Board of County Commissioners and the real property transfer tax. There are 3 amendments for consideration. One is attached in the work session document, and that was from Washoe County, which is to delete Section 6 of the bill, thereby defaulting to an effective date of October 1, 2023 for the bill. And the second amendment is to add a provision to sunset the bill on June 30th, 2025. And the third amendment is to add a requirement that the county recorder of any county completing a transfer of real property under the provisions of AB 143 submit a report to the Joint Interim Standing Committee on Government Affairs on or before June 30th, 2024, including without limitation the number of such transfers initiated and completed. Thank you.
Not seeing the amendment beforehand, I'd need an explanation why we sunset it in 2025, please.
Assemblyman Torres, for the record, I think we had a conversation about the sunsetting this during the bill hearing, and so that was because there was something in statute that was very similar that had to do with the transfer of real property that had passed, and so we were looking at that, and we recognize that there's already a place in statute where that exists. And so the sunset is so that we can have that conversation, come back and see if we need to extend it, if it was effective, if it wasn't, because when it had passed previously, it wasn't effective and it was actually never used. I believe Assemblyman DeLong would like to expand.
Yeah, I'll just add a little bit of detail. There's a provision in statute that was related to some land transfers in Nye County that never occurred. I believe testimony said that was a cumbersome and maybe even unrealistic process. This one seems more streamlined, more implementable. And let's see which one works, see if this one works, and then we can revisit it during the interim.
Assemblyman Hibbets.
My question is are these 3 amendments friendly amendments to the sponsor? Thank you, sir. And let the record show he nodded in the affirmative.
I was just going to say the same thing. Assembly members, any additional questions? All right. At this time, we'll entertain a motion to do pass as amend and do pass for AB 143. I had the motion from Vice Chair Duran, and then I had the second from Assemblyman Carter. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? This motion does carry. And I will give the floor statement to Assemblyman O'Neill. Congratulations. All right, we're going to go ahead and continue on. He doesn't. Assemblyman O'Neill, are you happy to have the floor statement, or would you like me to give it to a member? Oh, okay. Okay, there was confusion, but Assemblyman O'Neill will happily give the floor statement on his bill. All right, we will go ahead and carry on with AB 172.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Jennifer Rudy, Committee Policy Analyst. Assembly Bill 172 requires each local government employer to semi-annually provide each employee organization recognized by the local government employer certain information relating to each employee of the bargaining unit represented by the employee organization. Such information, as written and introduced in the bill, must include the address, telephone number, work contact information, and work location. However, there is an attached amendment from the bill's sponsor in the work session document, and that adds the name and email address to Section 1 as two pieces of information that need to be provided. Hopefully the committee has seen the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, and I will go ahead and add on that I had the opportunity to speak with Clark County. I don't believe Ms. Jacobs was able to make it. I know that they had a conflicting meeting, but Clark County has expressed that with the amendment, they are neutral. Thank you. Members, any questions? All right, I'll go ahead and Assemblyman Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just for the record, since I had an objection on the record, I want to make a clarification that I do agree with Amendment 3.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Is there any additional questions or remarks? All right, I will entertain a motion on AB 172. I have the motion from Assemblyman Gonzalez, and I have a second from Vice Chair Duran. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Can I just have the hands for the names for the secretary? So Assemblyman DeLong, Assemblyman Gurr, Assemblyman Hibbets, Assemblyman Koenig, and Assemblyman MacArthur. I apologize. And just to clarify, that was an amend and do pass, correct? Assemblyman Gonzalez? Yes. Yes. Thank you. And I will go ahead and assign the floor statement to Assemblyman Anderson. At this time, we'll go ahead and invite anyone wishing to speak in public comment. As a reminder, public comment allows for individuals to speak for up to 2 minutes to provide testimony on something that is related to this committee. Is there anyone in person wishing to give public comment? I don't see any here in Carson City. I don't believe I see anyone in Las Vegas. BPS, is there anyone on the line wishing to testify in public comment?
Chair, the line is open and working, but there's no callers on the line to provide public comment.
Perfect. Are there any comments from members before we adjourn? And as a reminder to the committee, tomorrow we'll be meeting at 9 a.m. in room 3143, so we'll be on the 3rd floor tomorrow. It's also local government day, which is obviously a big day in government affairs. And we'll be hearing two bills, AB 258 and AB 366. Any comments from members? Assemblyman MacArthur, I believe you had so much to say. No comment. That's his comment for the day. Assemblyman DeLong. Very efficient. Assemblyman DeLong appreciates the efficiency of this meeting. Let it be reflected. At this time, we will go ahead and adjourn the most efficient committee in the Nevada State Assembly.